Welcome to the first ever qualifying review here on the F1 Reviews channel. I mentioned all the way back now at the end of last season in Abu Dhabi, what did you guys want to see from me in 2019? And the main thing, the big story that you all wanted me to cover was qualifying. Last year I barely mentioned it at all. I didn't cover it on the Saturday, and then on the Sunday I left it alone almost completely. So this year a qualifying review will come out after every single race, and let's crack on with it. And this was your top three spoilers. Probably should say that, probably a bit late now, but yes, this is, if you're watching this, then it's very likely you would obviously like to know the result. Your top three were Lewis Hamilton claimed another pole position, obviously his first of the season, it being the first race of the year, but it was a Mercedes front row lockout with Sebastian Vettel only claiming third place. His teammate down in fifth, with Max Verstappen splitting the two Ferraris. Now, I'll go through the full result in a minute, but what a complete turnaround this has been from Mercedes. In testing, we came out of it, and it was almost universally accepted that Ferrari were going to be the team to beat. However, almost a second in front for the majority of the weekend so far. Mercedes looking dominant, and looks like it's going to take a hell of a challenge from Ferrari in the race to catch up to them if they want to take the victory. Here are the rest of the results then. As you can see, the top five were just as mentioned. In P6, my boy Romain Grosjean, a brilliant start to the year for Haas. Not quite as good as last year, but a 6th and 7th, brilliant job. Beating the likes of Renault, that's their main rival, I would say, going into this year. They just need to make sure they keep the wheels on the car this time when they come in for their pit stops. But a fantastic job. They are going to be thoroughly chuffed with that one. Someone else who's going to be chuffed, Lando Norris in 8th. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. Brilliant job for McLaren and for Norris on his debut, the highest ranked rookie today. Raikkonen was 9th, solid start for Alfa Romeo, 10th for Perez. The two Renaults, 11th and 12th, they'll be disappointed with that. Albon out qualifying Kvyat, Stroll in 16th, but the massive story, Pierre Gasly, 17th on the grid. Sainz as well, disappointing. He starts 10 places behind his teammate in 18th, and it is, as we all expected, the given going into qualifying that the two Williams were last on the grid. But I've got a couple of stories I want to talk about, and the first and the big one, let's be honest, Pierre Gasly, a car that many people felt going into this weekend could be challenging for the victory. He was out in Q1, 17th on the grid is where he will start tomorrow's race. Now, let's be honest, it wasn't the best start in qualifying for Gasly, that's probably an understatement, but it also wasn't a great start for Gasly in his Red Bull career. In testing, been in the car twice over the 2-week period, well actually an 8-day period. A few question marks were starting to be asked, but people didn't really think it was going to be a major issue when we got to Melbourne. And over practice, he looked behind Verstappen, but not completely miles away, and no one expected him to be out even in Q2. So the fact that he's out in Q1 is a mega shock. Now, the team haven't come out with any particular reason why he was out in Q1. Gasly himself has own the fact that the midfield was just so close, especially in that first session, that they just got caught out. A lot of excuses, but I think, from my personal perspective, I think it was just a mistake on Red Bull's part. They didn't expect that midfield to be so tight, and they felt that Gasly had a lot of breathing room, which he didn't have in the end. And even the likes of Raikkonen and Grosjean, two guys that ended up in Q3, those two were so close to getting out in Q1 just because of the nature of that midfield. We also saw Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll, two guys who their teammates got into Q3, also go out in Q1. Now, I also can tell that people are going to slam me that Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll's teammates are better than them or whatever, but there's still, the matter of the fact is that we were expecting a close midfield, but I don't think anyone was really expecting it to be as close as it was. And that really gets me even more hyped, more excited for the rest of this year, that if a team does make a mistake, there's no margin for error. If a guy, let's say Leclerc tries to go through on maybe Q1 or even Q2, I think this could be an issue. They try and risk it going through on the medium tyres, on the hard tyres. That's going to be an even more difficult option this year. Yes, there's still the gap to those top teams, but if Red Bull can get caught out, then perhaps on their day, Ferrari could get caught out, and I dare to say Mercedes, because the gap was similar last year with Ferrari and Mercedes. I do want to throw that out there. I'm not crazily worried about the championship just yet. That's a very similar gap, so I do expect Ferrari to still be up there fighting, but a gap I didn't expect to be so large was at the back of the field, Williams, and we knew they'd be behind, but in particular, Robert Kubica. I expected him to be very close to George Russell over the weekend, and yet we didn't see that at any point, particularly this weekend, and what actually, I suppose, took place over qualifying was a really scruffy session from Robert Kubica, and I understand he's had a very long time out of Formula 1, and he is carrying that injury, but there are people needing seats in Formula 1. So I've titled this section He Must Improve, because yes, it's one thing Alex Albon out qualifying Kvyat, even Norris out qualifying Sainz, but the actual gap between Kubica and Russell was huge. It was about 2 seconds. That's mega. Kubica's fastest time was 6 seconds off the pole time, and I know that is mainly because he's in a Williams and Hamilton's in a Mercedes, but still, 2 seconds off George Russell in his first ever qualifying session. That is huge. And not only that, hit the wall in qualifying coming into the pit lane, also in practice, and also managed to hit the wall in his fast final lap of the session, which I think skews this a little bit, but his final flying lap hit the wall, ended up getting a puncture, which consequently hurt Carlos Sainz's lap. He was then blocked by Kubica, who was in front of him, so that is why Sainz didn't get through. I'm not too sure if that hindered Gasly as well. It may very well have done. Considering Gasly hadn't gone through that time as well, that probably would be an indication for that as well. But Kubica, there is room for improvement here, which I suppose is a good thing in a way, because it can't really get much worse. But for a team that are looking for results, looking for these drivers to try and squeeze everything out, because don't get me wrong, I still love Robert. I still want to see him do well, and I think he can do well this year. But going into tomorrow, there'll be a few more question marks in his mind, and I think his target now for tomorrow is just to get the car home. They need those laps still, Williams. They need as much time as possible. And Kubica needs the laps as well. Under racing conditions is such a different environment to testing. It's very similar to today in qualifying. It's such a different environment. When you're pushing that car to its absolute limit, it's going to be learning. It's going to be learning for him. And George Russell, yes, he's a rookie, but George Russell's been in that environment in Formula 2, trying to get the maximum out of the car in qualifying. Kubica hasn't done a session like this since 2010. Yes, he's done testing, but in terms of pushing the car to the absolute limit, he has not done that for a very long time. But it's something that I saw in qualifying and was a little bit alarmed, because even 2 seconds is a big gap considering he didn't quite get that final flying lap away. But he wasn't the only one to be, well, in the wars, if you will. There are a few other guys, a few little moments on the grass, and many drivers, especially the two Haas cars, in the second to last corner, locking up and going fairly wide quite a few times, catching out quite a few people. But just looking back at the times, I still just wanted to highlight how close this midfield was. And really, we were talking the other day, or I was, on a Sunday Live with Sean over on the F1 Word and John T, and we were trying to sort of position that midfield, and we were saying, well, we don't really think you can. And when you look at the colours on the screen now, you really can't. We've got a McLaren in 8th, a McLaren in 18th. We've got a Racing Point in 10th, a Racing Point in 16th. We've got a 14th for an Alfa, a 9th for an Alfa, and the two Renaults. 12 for Ricciardo on his debut. He will be disappointed with that. There's no denying it. They said their target was to get to Q3, but also being out-qualified by his teammate Hulkenberg. He will be gutted with that, if I'm being fully honest. I think he will be gutted. But my driver of the day is got to be Lando Norris. A really good job from the Brit. And I have been critical of him over the winter. I didn't think the hype that he was coming into Formula 1 with was well, I felt it was justified, but I felt he was being overhyped in a sense because his Formula 2 career was fine, not stellar. And he has proved me wrong straight away. Now, we've got to give these drivers time. It might be for the rest of the year he is a little bit lacklustre, and I think that's why I'm hesitant with him now, because in his very first race, he got pole position and the race win. Then for the rest of the season, he didn't get a single race win. So I don't want to, again, add to the hype with Lando Norris, but I think someone like George Russell, over the winter, I just felt missed out a little bit on the hype. But a really good job carrying that McLaren through to 8th place. The only guys that beat him were the 2 Haas cars, the 2 Ferraris, Verstappen and the 2 Mercedes, which is incredible to think. And if he can get points tomorrow, McLaren will be chuffed. And my ones to watch for the race: Pierre Gasly, obviously coming through from 17th. He will be making overtakes. He will be a key source of entertainment for tomorrow. Charles Leclerc as well, another one who's going to be disappointed with today's result. 5th overall, behind Max Verstappen, but a sizable gap away from Vettel. And something coming into this year people were asking is, will he be able to really get that one flying lap, that incredible lap together? And so far, he hasn't been able to do that, but he did highlight that last year he wasn't able to do that in the Sauber for quite a bit of time, so give him time to adjust. 5th place, I think he can make gains in the race, so keep an eye on him. And Daniel Ricciardo in front of his home crowd, the dive bomb master, the king of the late braking. Watch out for him. He will be trying to aim for points, trying to aim for something special in the race. But that was your first ever qualifying review. The race is on in the very early hours of tomorrow morning, so keep an eye out for that. And I'm hoping to be on the race debrief, the cool down room. Well, what it is the live stream with Sean tomorrow after the race around about 9 o'clock, I believe. So that's with the F1 word. I'll be with him chatting about Romain Grosjean's first podium of the season. But let me know in the comments below, who was your driver of the day? Who are you looking forward to seeing tomorrow? And if you still have any predictions, we spoke about them yesterday in the weekend preview, but if you want to put your predictions in the comments below, feel free. Thank you for watching, and hopefully tomorrow you enjoy the race, and I'll see you in the next one.